Then we had our first of two features. I think we should just talk about both back to back here on Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler. And this was leaps and bounds the best thing that they have done. I'm just going to choose to forget every angle and assume this is the first words they have spoken since Shayna turned on her. I'm just going to assume we have saw none of the fat shaming or anything that preceded this. So Rousey says that she first became aware of Shayna Baszler back in Strikeforce, and we get still shots of Shayna in Strikeforce, and says that she was bartending. This was after she won the Olympics and then was done with judo and actually went to bartending before she got into MMA. And then they were on The Ultimate Fighter together. This was in 2013, and her first pick, and this was true, was Shayna Baszler. And her next pick was Jessamine Duke, by the way. And Baszler, they're going back and forth, and Baszler had a chip on her shoulder because tough was meant for up-and-comers, and I didn't consider myself an up-and-comer. And this was the bantamweight season when they were creating a champion at a 135 pound, or sorry, that they were not a champion. That was the future season, but regardless, kind of filling out the division. And then Misha and Ronda would fight at the end of the season for the title. So Rousey's story is about the final minute of grappling that season on Tough. Baszler made a joke that during this whole time on the show, you've never armbarred me. And Ronda says, ask Shayna how many times I armbarred her in that final minute, and you'll know who is the protege of who, which I thought was a great line.
Oh, awesome.
And was like too great a delivery to not be a true story.
Oh, this was honestly the best I've heard Ronda Rousey in her entire WWE run. A complete 180 from what we've got from her during this current build to Shayna Baszler. This to me felt like tough TUF Ronda Rousey. You know, the same sort of like, super heelish, but like completely natural and completely cocky and dominant personality that I think made her so attractive in the first place. They were never able to like fabricate that in a pro wrestling sort of vision. For whatever reason, they managed to here. She was like, she had this like great cocky smile attached to it as well. Just really kind of natural, excellent delivery here.
Yeah, and sort of the back and forth is that Shayna is stating how Rousey has this image of being this charitable friend that lets her friends live rent free with her, but really she just has her friends here that she can beat up. And it's like this toxic relationship that they have to be dependent on Ronda, and that Shayna showed up as a sparring partner for every one of Ronda's big fights. How many of my fights did she show up as a sparring partner for?
Mm-hmm.
Although she did fly to Cleveland for her independent wrestling show against Heidi Lovelace. So that did seem like a genuinely friendship. Then we go to part 2, and this was later on in the show, and they continue to talk about, Baszler's talking about this toxic relationship of a friendship, and the fact is Ronda pissed off everyone, and she needed Shayna. And Ronda tells this story. She's like, let me tell you this story. I'm like, oh, please, Ronda, please make this good. It was about the king and the stable boy. And the king gave the stable boy everything and showed loyalty. And for that loyalty, the stable boy killed the king. And liken this to Shayna trying to kill her. And she wanted Shayna to be her friend so badly. She gave her everything to the point that Shayna hated her for it. Baszler gave everything, she says, and I received nothing back. They explain it won't be a match, it will be a fight, and I'm going to take the one thing that is the most important to Ronda, her reputation. She's never been the baddest, and Baszler says that outside of her husband and her mother, I was the first one to hold Ronda's baby. I love that baby. I'm her godmother, and it's unfortunate that she's going to grow up and she will never be able to forgive me for what I'm going to do to her mother, Ronda Rousey. And this will be an MMA rules match. And this ruled. This was a fantastic series of videos to build this up. And in 6 minutes, this erased everything else for me. And they stuck the landing on this angle on the Go Home show.
It was honestly pretty unbelievable because again, Ronda and Shayna's material prior to this was not good at all. This was outstanding. I was also shocked that this came really from the WWE because I'm not used to seeing this type of storytelling from the WWE. This felt very much like a countdown special. And we were talking for weeks on about like who's the heel, who's the babyface in this feud. When the promos are this good, when the storytelling is this good, it doesn't matter who the heel and who the baby face is. What you got out of these 6 minutes is the story, the very believable, grounded in reality type of story between two people who had a falling out and now absolutely hate each other.
And you care about who wins.
And it's up to the audience, you know, just like at an MMA fight to decide who they want to cheer for. And I'm sure, like, you know, in attendance, I feel like the crowd is probably going to be very pro Shayna, but it feels like a real grudge because a lot of the things they were saying were probably entirely real. So, you know, not to say they hate each other, of course, but they took elements out of their own histories and crafted it into this beautiful narrative. That feels like it's the culmination of like, you know, this is their story. The reason, like, you know, this is probably the biggest story that these two will ever tell together as, you know, pro wrestling opponents, and felt fully realized in this form. And so maybe it kind of tells you like the difference between trying to do something live versus, you know, doing something under somebody's direction with the benefit of editing, with the benefit of multiple takes. This really should have been, you know, the type of thing that they were doing with Ronda Rousey since the beginning, with Shayna Baszler since the beginning. You're not going to have stories as this deep, you know, as deep as this, but clearly this Ronda Rousey and this Shayna Baszler came across so much better than they ever have. So, oh man, this was outstanding.
Yeah, and listen, you can't do this all the time, but you do not need to have a 10-year friendship to be able to take the principle of what made this work and apply it to your storytelling, that you don't always have to have the loud and over-the-top angles and contract signings, that sometimes you just do something like this. It can be very simple, doesn't necessarily fill 6 weeks of television time, but it is something to tell you about what can sometimes connect, and with people that we don't necessarily associate as these quote unquote great promos, which I always kind of push back on that, because not in your traditional sense, but in the right setting, everyone has like something that connects with them on a certain level that they can convey. And it's trying to get that out of the performer. And you can look at like real sports is a great backdrop. Like there are people that are not quote unquote wrestling promos, but can still be captivating talkers in their element where it feels real to them. And Shayna and Ronda was a perfect example here. This was an excellent end to what was kind of a forgettable buildup, but will not be. And it's funny because the match was kind of my least concern, that think the match will pull itself off. And with this, it kind of springboards this into a place that, you know, feels like this is a match worthy of one of your big shows of the year.
Now thinking back, I feel like their intent was probably, you know, not about like who's going to be heel, who's going to be baby faces. The content of like Ronda and Shayna's segments prior to this week, you know, they were confusing, because in a pro wrestling setting, you're always looking to see who you're supposed to cheer for, who you're supposed to boo. And I think they were so caught up in pro wrestling delivery that it kind of felt like one was trying to lead you one way or another. But clearly they had this story in their head the whole time that was really just, you know, a story of two people who have a real grudge against one another. And I think told through this way more, you know, almost like documentary like type of format, it felt much better realized than in a, you know, standard professional wrestling promo in front of an audience type of setting.